Well, let's start with a fourth case of Ebola that has been confirmed in the eastern Congo city of Goma. The government confirmed this late on Thursday as the disease now spreads in a city of more than 1 million people. The new case concerns the wife of a man who died of the virus earlier this week and who only sought treatment over a week after starting to show symptoms. Authorities say this raises concern that he may have affected more people in Goma. Their daughter also tested positive for Ebola, as well as 200, and there are nearly 200 contacts of the man that have been tracked down, 160 of whom were vaccinated. And let's turn now to news that has grabbed the attention of leaders in Africa and beyond. It's a report that's been published by the United Nations, and it shows that 2018 saw the highest levels of children killed or maimed in armed conflict since the UN started monitoring these violations. The report also highlighted the grave situation for many children stuck in Somalia's ongoing conflict.
The UN's annual report of the Secretary General on children in armed conflicts painted a grim picture of the impact of war on children. While grave violations decreased between the 2017 to 2018 period, sexual violence against boys and girls remained prevalent.
All violations are decreasing, all of them, except one, which is sexual violence against children, which is exactly the same amount as the year before. So that is a plateau that has to be broken, and we're not making any inroads into breaking that plateau.
Gamba also made a plea for the world to keep an eye on Somalia. According to the report, over 2,000 children were recruited to join armed militias.
All the numbers are very high, all of them, all the violations on all the categories of Somalia. So I want to just make a plea right now to keep an eye on Somalia. If anybody can assist us in engaging in Somalia, right now there is no engagement, but it's desperately needed. There's been over 1,000 children killed and maimed. There's been 2,300 children recruited last year alone. There's been 375 children in detention. There's been sexual violence against 331 children.
The report did highlight the number of children benefiting from reintegration and release programs increased compared to the previous year. Among the countries witnessing the increase was the DRC, which saw 2,253 children separated from armed groups. Astatal, CGTN.
Well, let's bring you more now on this report. We're joined in studio for some analysis by Dr. Francis Onditi, the HSRC Fellow with the Africa Institute in Pretoria, South Africa. Dr. Onditi, always a pleasure to have you with us. In your view, how would you characterize the situation facing children in conflict areas across the continent?
Lindy, I would say this. There is a very close association between rising cases of conflict, especially in Africa, and children who happen to be killed or maimed in such situations. You are aware the latest report tells us that more than 24,000 actually children in 2018 were verified as subjected to, to violation in armed conflict. And these were only 20 conflicts reported in this part of the world. So that I'm not surprised with the statistics because when the environment is engulfed in conflict, chances are children are either killed, maimed, or subjected to humanitarian catastrophes. And you, if you want to take an understanding of this, if you look at countries that are in conflict, we are talking about Somalia in the Horn of Africa, in West Africa, Mali, DRC, you'll find the cases, they're actually topping, they're leading in terms of children who are actually either abducted in front line or subjected to humanitarian catastrophes. Somali only recorded about 2,400 children at that period who were actually subjected to abuse or maybe recruited to behave like a human shield during the fighting. So the situation is likely to continue because the projection we have is that conflict in Africa, especially non-armed conflict, is likely to continue. And as it continues, you know, of course, the armed conflict, what we call the asymmetrical fighters, they don't have formal army. So they go back to what we call the soft targets to recruit children from the community. And that's how children get into the armed fights.
And Dr. Onditi, what happens to these children years down the line, those that are maimed, those that are abused, those that are recruited into armed conflict? What are some of the direct and indirect consequences of their sort of intimate involvement in conflict?
Lindy, it is really a disturbing situation. If you look at the report of the UNICEF and other reports that we come across all the time, they are quite, you know, at macro level, children who are subjected to armed conflict, they're likely to be denied quite a number of opportunities. Their liberty, humanitarian access to food and other basic needs will always be a problem. But I think fundamentally what we continue to see in Africa, you know, the research that we have shows that, you know, when children are cut off from the basic necessities, or in armed conflict, the humanitarian assistance, chances of them developing are very low. And so you will not be surprised to find the Human Development Index of those countries that I've mentioned earlier is very low. Like, for example, access to education, progression, transition of children from one level of education to another. It is always stagnating. Why? Because they are denied the very fundamental, you know, basic needs.
Well, it's clear this report paints a rather grim picture for children in conflict, but indeed for the future of those countries too. Thank you so much, Dr. Onditi, for that analysis, and certainly quite an indictment on leaders and those involved in conflict, that the most vulnerable citizens are far from safe.